We have established that dry beans are for chumps. Yeah?
That's what I want to grow. So I want to be a chump apparently and grow dry beans.
This is Serious Grower Podcast. I'm Anna. I'm an entomologist. I'm a scientist, and I'm using this podcast to talk to all kinds of growers and eaters who are serious about their farms, their gardens, their local food systems. And I'm asking, how can science help? Today's co-host is Casey. She is an experienced market farmer, having grown in Northern California and now in the Bitterroot Valley out in western Montana. Casey and her husband Jesse are transitioning into non-commercial farming. They're homesteaders now. You'll be hearing plenty from her because her experience brings so many unique perspectives and because she's my best friend. We had this conversation during the depths of winter. Depending on who you're talking to, some may consider this seed catalog season, and some folks might consider winter as tree pruning season. But it is important that you know we had been discussing John Chapman before this started, otherwise known as Johnny Appleseed.
I'm wearing these new glasses that I got like 2 years ago for the first time right now. And you know how it's wearing new glasses.
Everything looks glassy and far away, and they're like, whoa.
Woo, how tall am I? Whoa. Anyway, I had to switch out of transitions because we're going to go up to the pass after this. Transitions in the snow, they just get too dark for me. I made my transition.
Going on some kind of expo. Where are you guys going?
We're going to go like tour around on our skis, get out for some exercise. Jesse, there's this cross country ski race coming up this Saturday at the pass that Jesse's supposed to groom tomorrow, but it's supposed to just snow up there. He's like wondering if it's even worth it. That plow didn't come through the parking lot last weekend. This guy got stuck in the parking lot and his kids had walked in. Well, we're just going to go check out the scene up there. You never know.
Do you want to get into it? Do you want to talk about seeds?
All right. Yeah, first I wanted to tell you I'm borrowing this book from my friend and it's really good. It's called Garden of Invention. It's about Luther Burbank and the business of breeding plants. I'm like halfway through, but anywho.
Does it start with like the old-timey stuff?
Yeah, it starts with like his childhood of being the most shy kid around and they could hardly even send him outside because he was so shy. Then he follows his older brothers to California from Massachusetts where he was like, it's probably better for gardening there.
What time in history was this?
This is like late 1800s, like post-Civil War, people heading out west to California for opportunity. Here's a fun factoid I just learned in this book, Garden of Invention, about Luther Burbank. They grew up in the same town, Luther Burbank and John Chapman, right down the road from each other in somewhere in Massachusetts, like central Mass. Here's the story I heard. First off, he was growing from seed because it was easier. You don't have to do grafting. You can just carry a bunch of seeds in your pocket, pop them in along the way, like nurse them a little bit and then move on. Then you don't have to think about it so much. It wasn't even so much to establish orchards. It was to establish the semblance of an orchard. It's not like we were actually gonna harvest the apples for their Homestead Act qualifications. They had to show that there was improvement on the property. So here Johnny Appleseed comes, plant a couple apple seeds, boom, apples, land homesteaded. That's all they needed.
It was just for show. Like they didn't care if the apples were tasty. But then like they had all these apples to make cider, and that kind of was part of the American culture, is like we were all drunk off cider all the time. I often think about scientific progress like in a linear fashion. Like, oh, Johnny Appleseed must have just started everything from seeds because they didn't have grafting yet. But like they had grafting since like forever ago. Like I think before history, he was doing it for the reason that you said, which was like it was cheaper and easier and it didn't matter. And then I heard a story that he was doing it for religious reasons. I don't know if that's true or not. Like there's like ebbs and flows, like people take giant leaps in technology, but then like there's always the original, like there's always a start from seed.
That's true. And I'm sure maybe 1 out of 1,000 of those apple seeds turned into something that was palatable, you know?
Right. Yeah. And like when we're talking about vegetable seeds, like there are like some whiz bang varieties that are F1 offspring of hybrid crosses and they do this, that, and the other thing. But there's still plenty of really, really good seeds that are just open pollinated regular. You can save it later and it does a really, really great job. Everything is equally good and they all have their purpose, right?
Another fun factoid in this book I just found out, and I think it was Stark Brothers Nursery. They were like one of the biggest plant stock providers at the time. Like fruit trees, gimmicky advertising sort of back in the days, they would have these contests every year for people to submit their apples, and they would choose like the prize winning apple, their favorite apple. That's how the Red Delicious got discovered. One of these Stark Brothers just sort of contests, and they would buy the rights to that apple and then get to, market it from there on out. As per the contest rules.
One of our orchard specialists got invited to meet with somebody who was starting a heritage orchard here in New Hampshire. The extension guy invited me just because I was learning about apples at the time. This guy was so stoked about all these ideas. I've never met anybody who is this enthusiastic. And so he brought us into his kitchen and he had a stack of books. It was a stack of 8 volumes. It must have been 2 feet of books, right? And it was just a list of all the names of apple varieties.
Wow. My friend who lives up the road from here and used to work in extension, but also at the research station, her thing is apples. And she is doing this glossy sort of photo book of every single type of apple. And you know how there's apple experts, and is usually this old man at the fair, and you can bring him any type of apple and he'll taste it and tell you what kind of apple it is. This is still a thing that happens, but she's trying to follow along in that sort of vein, but photo, and then she'll do a cross section slice of the apple, show the inside of the apple, a photo book of all the different apples.
I would say we should connect these people, but I don't know if I think they want to be the guy, they want to be,
I just all want to be the guy. But she is at the point where, she can taste a lot of apples and be very ho-hum, oh, that's a Wolf Point. Oh, a Jonathan. If she has to taste another Macintosh apple, it's oh, geez, another Macintosh.
There's a lot of genetic diversity even within Macintosh. And there's a bajillion named varieties within that family. So,
well, I am the one who's brought her so many different apples, and she'll be like, Casey, it's another Macintosh.
I love it so much. When you think about Burbank, you might be more likely to think about Burbank, California, which was actually named after a dentist from New Hampshire, believe it or not. So he moved out to California in 1867 to ranch sheep. So not at all related to the Luther Burbank we were talking about. When I think about Burbank, and this is because I'm a stone cold nerd, I think about the Burbank potato, which was an invention of Luther Burbank, along with some other plants that you might actually be familiar with, including the Shasta daisy and the plumcot, which is a cross between a plum and an apricot. His work also inspired the Plant Patent Act of 1930, which was a landmark piece of federal legislation signed by President Herbert Hoover. This allowed for the first time the patenting of new and distinct varieties of plants. This legislation was meant to incentivize agricultural and horticultural innovation by giving breeders the same intellectual property protections as mechanical inventors. Existing patent protection laws didn't cover living organisms at the time because they can't be described with the same precision as machines. This makes sense. So supporters at this time, which included Thomas Edison, ever heard of him? They argued that such a law would have rightfully enriched Burbank and would give us many more Burbanks to come. But this protection was only extended to asexual reproduction. So we're talking about cuttings, graftings, buddings, and this was to ensure that the offspring are genetically identical clones of the original. The act explicitly excludes seeds, which are produced through sexual reproduction of plants. Later on, there was a mechanism to patent protect seeds, but we didn't see any legislation on that until the 70s in the Plant Variety Protection Act. They produced something called Certification of Protection and Certification of Utility. This gets very complicated, so I'm not going to dive into it here. but this would only be important for crops that are true to seed. So this is a term that comes up often. A crop is quote unquote true to seed if the seed it produces grows into plants with the same exact characteristics, flavor, color, shape. This occurs when a plant is homozygous, meaning its genetic makeup is stable through self-pollination or isolated pollination. So when we're talking about something that's true to seed, you have to have both consistent genetics handed down from parent to seed, and you also have to be concerned about what happens during sexual reproduction or pollination. I will come back to this. Well, let's talk about vegetables. Are you shopping for vegetables right now?
Well, I do. It is the time of year where I get a bunch of seed catalogs in the mail, which I never order from, but I like looking at because they do a pretty just like good job doing their catalog. I look through there and I'm always like, do I want to try that? Do I want to try that? I'm a sucker for seed catalogs. It was last year that I was going through a seed catalog and I found that bingo bean. All of a sudden, I had to have these bingo beans.
Let's talk about beans because we have established that dry beans are for chumps. Yeah?
That's what I want to grow. So I want to be a chump apparently and grow dry beans. I want a bean in the bean.
Yeah, that's what we expect, is being in the I cannot even tell you the culture shock I had at that grower meeting where like the guy was holding up a jar of green beans and we're like, oh, people expect a bean in the bean. And I was like, that is gross. And that's when I knew I was a Yankee and I was not welcome there.
Sir, what did you say? Bean and bean.
Yeah, people expect a bean in their beans.
Well, I guess I'm that sort. And only because, well, I guess once we switched from being market farmers to more, home garden farmers, I'm not a big fan of green beans. I don't like eating green beans. They were great for market. Me not liking them, first, I wouldn't eat them. So I'd have them all to sell. I did like that for a market garden, is growing things that I particularly didn't like, but would be so productive. Then you'd have them every single week and you could keep harvesting off the same plant every week. Green beans, they're great for that. Once I was more of a home gardener, I was like, well, I do like growing beans because, you kind of just stick them in there and they go for it. You don't have to think about them so much. And I do eat a lot of dried beans. So here's my journey with the bingo bean. Started last year. I was searching through a tutorial seed catalog, which I don't know how I even got on their mailing list. I'm not sure if maybe it was like a Stark Brothers subsidiary or something like that. I don't know how they got my address, but all of a sudden I got this territorial seed catalog. I was flipping through. I see a shelling bean that's a pole bean. And I'm like, no way. Every single dried bean I've ever grown has been a bush type of bean. But I do love growing pole beans because they're so beautiful in the garden. And I like having a beautiful looking garden, having a nice, cool trellis with all the beans on it. All of a sudden, I had decided I had to have the bingo bean. Go to the territorial website to order bingo beans. Sold out. This is not my first time of experiencing a sold out seed. I've come to find out, like, you really, once the seed catalog comes, you put your order in right then if you want stuff to be not sold out. And this was like months later. I was looking through that seed catalog in maybe like February, and it was too late. Bingo beans sold out. And then so I'm like, oh my God, I decided I had to have the bean. I searched low and high all over the internet, and there was maybe like 2 other suppliers in the US of bingo beans, both sold out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this has to be an amazing bean. It's like Jack and the Beanstalk, like magic beans. I come across this website. It's called Oro Seeds. And
Like gold.
Oro, O-R-O. And it's kind of like a older looking 90s website. I was like, is this even real? But they had bingo beans and they were in stock. There was some weird like translation issues, and turns out this company is in Bulgaria, but they had the bingo beans. So I had to like figure out, and I had to pay with PayPal. And what I was ordering, and I wasn't sure if it was the right thing, and I had to look it up, was 25 seminkis was what I ordered, which means seeds in like a Bulgarian, I suppose. And so there was like this translation issue, and I'm like, are the things even going to come? About 2 months later, and this is February, the beans did come in this, international package from Bulgaria. I was like, my seminkis. I ordered 2 packs of 25 seminkis just to make sure, I got 50 seminkis there in the mail. I grew those bingo beans last season. And you saw my trellises I made with the just
Yeah, they were
upside down
beautiful.
T-posts. Yeah, they were cool. And they were vigorous and they climbed all the way up. And it must have been like, 10-foot T-posts. And they would have still gotten more if I had more room for them to grow high. They matured in our growing season here in Montana and are dried on the vine, just like you want for shelling beans. And then I have like 2 quarts of beans.
And how many seminkis did you save until next year?
Well, I saved the whole jar of beans is right now in my pantry.
Are you going to save seeds or are you going to buy them again?
Oh, I'm going to save those. I guess I don't have a good take on like which seeds are true to seed and which ones, you have to grow in isolation.
That's a really good question. We can find out because I think beans are true to seed. You know what? Like out of the corner of my eye, there's a pot of beans growing I'm looking at right now. This is what we do to raise bugs on plants is that we buy beans from the grocery store and plant them.
Really?
Well, it's just like the easiest way to grow a plant. It's something that like if you're raising like thrips or this is something that all of my colleagues who work with predatory mites do. It's kind of hard to find bean seeds that are not treated or it's kind of expensive to get beans that are not treated. So for us, it doesn't matter what the resulting bean is. It just needs to be a plant that's really easily grown. So we just buy grocery store beans. But I can find out about whether or not beans are true to seed. Okay, when we are talking about green beans or snap beans versus dry beans, they are all the same plant species, Phaseolus vulgaris. They just differ in when you harvest the pod. In this case, green bean refers to the maturity more than its color. They are picked when the pod is still young, succulent, and snappy. You eat the whole pod, and the seeds inside are tiny and undeveloped. That is, depending on what part of the country you're living in. I've lived in some southern areas of the U.S. where they wait a little longer to pick their snap beans. They still eat the whole pod. They just like a more mature pod that has like a closer to mature seed inside. Dry beans, on the other hand, are left on the vine until the plant dies and the pods become brown and brittle and kind of paper thin, and only the hard, fully developed seeds inside are eaten. The pods are discarded. This is also what you would do if you wanted to save the seeds of a green bean plant that you like and want to grow next year. You let that plant mature and you let them dry and save those seeds. But are they true to seed? We know that we need both consistent genetics handed down from parent to seed, and we are also concerned with what happens during sexual reproduction, pollination. What determines the stability? You might see a few terms when you're browsing your seed catalog: open pollinated or OP, and F1 hybrids. So open pollinated varieties, these are stable varieties. So we know that these varieties have handed similar genetics from parent to seed, and they've been bred for generations to ensure the offspring remain consistent. F1 hybrids, these are crosses between 2 different parents. The seeds from the hybrid plant will segregate, meaning the next generation will be random, often inferior mix of their grandparents' traits. These are not true to seed. What vegetable groups are known to be true to seed? So something like a potato is never grown from seed because they are genetically very complex. They are grown from tubers, which are genetically identical to their parent plant. Squash and pumpkin are moderately true to seed, while open pollinated varieties are genetically stable. They cross-pollinate pretty easily via bees and other pollinating insects. So if you're thinking about saving your seed, as long as you're isolating, say, your zucchini from other species of cucurbits like Blue Hubbard, you should be just fine saving seeds. Seed producers are experts in this, so you should feel very confident in open pollinated seeds from catalogs. The same goes for tomato. Most tomatoes are self-pollinating, wind-pollinated, vibrating. So unless a bee carries pollen from a different variety nearby, the seeds will reliably produce the same fruit. This is why we can reliably have heirloom tomatoes. It's pretty easy to limit the hanky-panky between flowers because tomato flowers just aren't as attractive to pollinators as squash flowers. Beans are primarily self-pollinators. The flower often pollinates itself before it even opens, preventing this quote unquote contamination from other varieties. Beans are pretty true to seed typically, unless there's a lot of genetic variation in the group you're interested in. I think Casey doesn't have to worry about isolating her bingo beans from other beans in her garden. However, in the case of that jar of beans that she has in her closet, it might have a little bit more genetic variation than some of the more carefully cultivated varieties we're used to here in the States. But her plant should produce beans that are pretty close to what she enjoyed eating last year. Bingo beans are a cultivar or cultivated variety of the Borlato landrace. A landrace is a locally adapted traditional variety of a plant that has developed over time through adaptation to its specific natural and cultural environment. In this case, we are talking about a landrace from Italy. So it makes a lot of sense that Casey ended up having to go to a European website to get these seeds. Back to my conversation with Casey, where we discuss modern breeding programs, and we do touch briefly on the cucurbit breeding program at UNH, which is now being led by Chris Hernandez because she noticed a UNH bred variety in her seed catalog.
Luther Burbank in this book
Yeah,
I'm
tell me
reading.
about it.
He has all sorts of opinions on breeding, and I'm only halfway through the book. One of his things that he was pretty adamant about is like you kind of have to make a plant want to mutate if that's what you're looking for. You have to challenge, you have to break it.
Do you know what his philosophy was? Did he accept evolution as a theory when it came out?
Oh, yeah. And so Darwin was pretty well proven by the time he was like a kid, but that was his first sort of spark into
Yeah.
this world of plant evolution. At the time, it was like in the name of manifest destiny to create the best plants, and our country is going to have the best plants, America.
And it just totally matches the American spirit that we're made of tougher stock and we were challenged. So therefore, maybe that's the birthplace of American exceptionalism to the point where you need to challenge the stock in order to produce a better. Well, he wasn't making beans, was he?
He made all sorts of stuff in Santa Rosa, California. Luther Burbank Gardens is still a place you can go where he used to live and had one of his big research plots. I think it's just pretty interesting because, he did a lot of this stuff just by himself. He had some workers, but it was just his hobby and he managed to make a good go of it.
And there's still people out there doing that. If you look at all those seed saver clubs, they're still doing the same thing that Burbank was doing.
In addition to the philosophy of you kind of have to break it for it to mutate to get these different sort of phenotypes to come out, he had his own sort of method of selecting the good ones. He said that you had to tempt the plant to change, and he would talk to his plants. He would tell it what he wanted it to do. And then at the same time, when it comes to selecting the plants, he would just kind of look at the plant, get the feel of it. A lot of it had to do with vibrations, vibrational energy, things like this. And this was at the time when scientist was first becoming a term,
They were distinguishing scientists from other things.
I guess they would have called themselves horticulturalists at the time.
Yeah.
Horticulturalists of the day wanted him to be documenting all these changes, wanted it all well documented. He wasn't so good at keeping an office and keeping records like that. He had his own system where he would rip off the hem of his shirt and tie it around a plant in the field, and he would know what that meant. But it wasn't ever documented anywhere, Whatever he did, it was amazing, and the horticulturalists didn't get it, and so they tried to discredit him.
Discredit is one thing. Have a grain of salt about some of this information. So a situation that's really common to young scientists now, where you come in to replace somebody who retired. Not only is there a lot of gear left behind that is not useful to you, I have experienced this myself many, many times. It's you show up and there's some guy saying, look at all this great stuff I left for you. And it's not only is it all garbage, but a lot of it sometimes is kind of dangerous. It's full of mercury or something. It's a huge, huge burden that they're leaving behind. But they're you're all set. You're all ready to start collecting data and doing science. And you're oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you for your service. You want to be super respectful of the work they've done because it was so important. But things change so fast now. Chris often talks about he thinks about his research program as being really separate from his breeding program. Like the breeding program is looking at like what's next, doing that traditional field stuff. And then the research program is more like looking at like genetic markers and all the ways that scientists can kind of like record that, like, yeah, like the plant that you're talking about in this paper from 20 years ago, there's a genetic link. It's really cool stuff, but it's complicated.
Yeah, I like that way of thinking about it, is that it's two separate things, breeding and research. And Luther Burbank was a breeder.
Yeah, and they talk to each other and they learn things from each other, but it's kind of two different paths, like two different parallel paths. You can get important information, like what are people looking for when they're opening up their seed catalogs? What are the characteristics they're looking for? And then like going back to the research and saying like, oh, like, well, this genetic marker almost always delivers that characteristic, or sometimes it does in certain circumstances and sometimes it doesn't, because like biological organisms are plastic. They respond differently in different environmental conditions. It's really interesting. That's why like every time you see a little note, like you said that you saw like, oh, that's a UNH seed variety. Or like you go, oh, like let's hear the story behind that. Like I think that's so fun and so interesting, but maybe other people find it tedious.
I bet most people don't even pay any attention to it at all. I saw some footnote in the high mowing catalog in the winter squash section, and there'd be a few of those that were labeled, and it was trademarked Loy's Choice. Oh, Loy, he was the breeder or researcher, I'm not sure what his title was, at University of New Hampshire.
That trademark, anytime you see that trademark, that means that the company who's selling that seed licensed that variety and they pay a little bit to the University of New Hampshire. A little bit of that money goes into the research program.
Goes right along with how Luther Burbank operated, is he would license these things to like the seed catalogs who would come and want to see his new innovations in plant breeding, and then they would license them, sell them through the catalog. And then he got to the point where he wanted to just do breeding. He didn't want to run a licensing office. He would just straight up sell you the variety for like $3,000 and then never think about it again. Then it was yours. He had a catalog. It's not like a seed catalog you think of. It's not for consumers. It was for the seed catalogs to come buy the stock from him. And then they would own that variety after paying like $3,000-$4,000 for a golden plum or something like that, you know?
And I know people have really different opinions about this particular topic and like find it really offensive, right? To sell like the genetics of a plant. I think the thing that's always missing is that like you could save the seed from that and regrow it. As long as you don't sell it as that variety, you're not breaking any laws. It's not stopping you from saving seed. There's a lot of horror stories about like big corporations pursuing legal action because people save seeds. And it's not because they save seeds, it's because they saved the seed and they sold it as the thing that company spent a lot of time marketing. I can definitely see why people feel that that's icky. But a lot of the times those trademarks are just going to like support more research, right?
Yeah, that's interesting how it could go to both ways.
All right, I will leave it there for now. Thank you so much to my friend Casey, and thank you to Luther Burbank for all of his hard work. Find photos of what we discussed on our Instagram at Serious Grower. Serious Grower Podcast is a production of New Hampshire community-supported research. If you're interested in becoming a co-host of Serious Grower or would like to learn more about our mission to democratize agricultural research, visit our website at nhcsr.org or come over to the YouTube channel at NHCSR, where we're sharing insights from the agricultural research community and vlogging about our research efforts on the farm. You can support this work by liking and subscribing, or even better, consider joining our Patreon community.